Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Roland Frazier, and Kevin Nations. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 27 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you could email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Tracy Hazzard. Tracy is the co-founder of Hazz Design. And together with her husband, Tom, who was a previous guest on the show, she launched over 270 products that have achieved over $2 billion in retail sales. And along the way, they obtained 41 patents. She's also the CEO of Podetize, which is a podcasting platform used by over 550 podcasts with over 37,000 episodes to date. In addition to being an acclaimed product designer, Tracy is a fantastic speaker, speaking on stages worldwide, very often about innovation and intellectual property. She also hosts several podcasts of her own, including Product Launch Hazzards, WTFFF 3D printing, Feed Your Brand, the New Trust Economy, and the Binge Factor. Wow. I'm a little bit intimidated by interviewing her, being that she is the podcast expert and also can give me a run for my money when it comes to intellectual property. But I'm really pleased to welcome here today my friend, Tracy Hazzard. Welcome, Tracy. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk to you. Any podcaster. This is my favorite thing, is to get to chat on a podcast and get to catch up with people who I get to see at events sometimes, but we don't get to have good conversations, in-depth kind of conversations about things that we both are passionate about, like innovation, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. I love it. And I'm so glad that you're here. And you've got so many great stories to tell. So I like to tell stories that show the value of IP and the role that it can play in exit. But Tracy has one of the best stories to tell about how IP truly multiplied the value that a entrepreneur received at the time of exit. So you want to tell us a little bit about that, Tracy?
Well, keep in mind that I started out I'm going to say my design world. I started out in the world doing a lot of what we would call ghost designing. It's kind of like ghost writing a book, right? So you buy products every single day at mass market retail and you don't know that I designed them. That's how it would work. We designed for Martha Stewart. We designed for Costco, Walmart, Target, places like that, and brands within that. And one of those brands was a great company. And I say was, but they still exist. So they're still there, but we haven't worked for them in a long time. But Wayland Furniture. And Wayland Furniture out of San Diego, California, and they'd been known for creating TV stands. And we came in and we did a whole different product line for them. We did a whole line of office chairs for them. But when we came in and they were doing these TV stands, and they were doing really good business every single year, selling them to all of the big name retailers, and they had filed a patent on what they called a 3-in-1. Which basically created multifunction. So you could take your TV, you could hang it on the wall, you could put it on the stand, you could put it on the base portion of it, and you had all these different ways to configure it. And they hadn't been able to really get that patent issued. So it'd been about, I think it was in patent holding for well over 4 years, which is I think that's extremely long. Maybe Rich, you have that's not long at all, but for furniture patents, that's
well
kind of long.
Average.
Yeah, it's well above average. That's what I would say too, from my experience on it. And so anyway, so we thought, well, that was odd. And so because Tom and I already held so many patents, and Tom Hazzard is my partner and husband, and he's already been on your show. So, but because we had so many patents already, they said, can you take a look at this and tell us what you think? And so we looked at it, we thought some of it wasn't written to clearly identify where the value was in the marketplace. And that was probably why it was getting technically hung up, because it wasn't an amazing techno feat of any kind, but its innovation and packaging these things together in the marketplace was actually fairly innovative. And so that's what we helped them rewrite some of their claims and had a conversation with a patent and trademark office, which is very rare that any inventor does, but we weren't the named inventor. So it didn't really matter in that case. We were advising and helping to clarify the language in plain English in a way that someone who isn't a designer or isn't an engineer might understand. And that's what really helped there. So when their patent issued, what happened is that they went from what was $100 million company in just terms of straight revenue, and $100 million is pretty decent size for a furniture company in terms of like line. But if you wanted to sell the company, you'd be lucky if you got 1.5 times revenue to sell the company. And the owner of the company, Ken Whalen, had received multiple offers to buy the company, but it was just all at that kind of like revenue, get out of the company kind of thing. And he just didn't want to do it. It wasn't where he saw the value. But after this patent was finally issued and they were able to stop some of the other placements of knockoffs that had happened, because when you go on for 4 years, people don't believe you're actually going to get your patent issued. And so they stopped worrying about it as a defensive strategy. And so they were like, knockoffs were going into the market left and right. And they were able to stop that. And when they did that, they came back and almost immediately got an offer for 3 times their value. So they were at $300 million in terms of their offer that they received, which was really high. And then plus it had earnouts and a whole bunch of other things along the way. And they were bought by one of the largest furniture importers or exporters in the world and out of China. And that's just an amazing feat to be able to do that in such a difficult industry that's all trend-based. But the power of that patent and what that added to the portfolio was just huge.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's like probably on what they invested in the patenting, it had to be 1,000-time ROI.
Oh God, easily. Cause I think we only charge them $10,000 to make a phone call and review something. Like it was nothing for what we did. We did do something else that was a little bit interesting. Cause I was like, 10,000 is a lot for a phone call. We don't normally charge that. We would have probably charged $1,000 for that phone call, but we charged 10,000 because what we did was we did something we call a patent fortress. So if somebody has a patent that is valuable and, but sometimes the way that you accomplish it could easily be circumvented. So, and in their case, it was the concept of it, but there was a couple of detailed outlines about how you accomplished it. And so what we did was we invented 3 other patents that surrounded it, 3 different ways to accomplish the same thing and still get the same result without violating the patent. And so they were able to add 3 more patents, which also increased the value because now you have 4 patents in your portfolio, not just 1. Though all 3 of those eventually issued, even though at the time that they sold the company, they hadn't issued at that point. So they added that. So that also kind of creates it so that people can't find ways around it. And it makes it better when you go to sell your company because the lawyers can't come in and say, well, there's so much risk here. When they see 4 different ways to make the same thing, they're thinking, oh, that's going to be a lot harder to knock off. So your risk factor just went down. And so that's what we did for them. And I think they ended up actually utilizing one of the ways we made it because it happened to be a more streamlined, simplified way to make one of their new products. So they did eventually use it. So it wasn't just an extra patent.
Yeah, that's amazing. And in general, I guess it's the value of a patent portfolio, the synergy there. It's like if you are able to obtain multiple patents for someone, or you as an inventor, if you're able to obtain multiple patents, then it greatly magnifies the value for a lot of different reasons, including that anyone who looks at it and considers, well, what do we need to do to get around the patent? You've not only made it, let's say, 4 times more difficult to do so, but you've increased the cost of even assessing what these patents stand for tremendously. So it's like when let's say when a client is asking, can I get around this company's patent portfolio? I have to ask them, is it really worth it? Because it's going to take a lot for us to even analyze these patents. So you just create a much bigger barrier to entry when you create a patent portfolio. And so that's a great story of how you've done that successfully.
Right. And in a way, we preemptively did that, right? We preemptively did that with high design skill, right? Because we know what we're doing. We were in the marketplace. We know how to design furniture. If you have a bunch of lawyers coming into it, they don't know. Yeah, there's a path maybe, but they don't know if that's physically possible. They're not
Yeah.
creators. So yeah, we think patent portfolios of intellectual property. And with that, we say more than patents. Patent, trademark, it might be proprietary technology. You could have copyrights in there. Like there could be a whole bunch of things that you put together. We like to look at every single entity that we do or every single project that we used to do with our clients. We would look at that as adding to the portfolio for them.
Yeah, I love it. And, like I said before, when it comes to IP, you give me a run for my money. You have so much experience in creating value for your clients through IP, and knowing when it's appropriate and not wasting money on the wrong IP at the wrong time and for the wrong reasons.
That's such a good point that you're just raising right there. Like the entrepreneurship view of it, or the business owner's view of using intellectual property, has to be considered, because look, lawyers can only recommend to you, like, this is possible. I think we can achieve this. I can't guarantee it, but there's a path, and we've done our search, we've done all the due diligence and all these things on that. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to use it, if it's not going to be useful to you being a part of your business strategy, then is it worth the money you're spending on it and the time you're spending on it? Is it going to achieve the value you need at the end of the day? We always look at that. Sometimes we have gone against where an attorney, a client's attorney, said, we don't think we should file that patent. It's not really strong. And we've actually recommended that they do it because it's a defensive strategy. So there's sometimes some of those things that you do where you're defending your territory on a shelf in case of retail, which you really need to do. And so even if it's not strong, it's just the idea that that's there is going to help give you a little bit more shelf life than you would get before the knockoffs start coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting, even those not strong patents become valuable when you go to exit. I mean, not all businesses make it to exit, but those that do will get a big ROI, even on the crappy IP.
Right. Well, I mean, in this case, like one of the chairs we designed had it kind of had a unique herringbone, which is kind of like stripes that go into each other, a herringbone design out of the leather in the back of the chair. And the company didn't want to bother to file 4 different, which is the way we usually recommend it on a 3-dimensional product, like a piece of furniture or a chair. We would recommend 4 different design patents rather than 1. So you have your face, because there's one pattern there. You have the side, might be your arm or something that you've got on the chair, the back, and the base. And so we would recommend all of those views, because anyone can change, some amount of the patent. I think it's up to 10% or something. If they change the design up to 10%, it's not an infringement from a design patent situation. And that's just too easy to do. Create a different stitch pattern, do something. But now we've created it where, because we're highlighting 4 different parts of it, they have to change more of the product, so it doesn't tend to look exactly the same when it goes in the market. So we used to use this strategy, but this company just decided they didn't want to spend the money. They didn't want to, they were being a little bit cheap about it, because design patents aren't terribly expensive. And what happened is that this chair went into Staples and was amazingly, and sold really, really well in Staples. And Staples Direct decided to knock the company off and make the chair themselves. And that was a $4 million a year chair. That's how much it did at retail. And they lost $4 million because they wouldn't, spend a few $1,000s on patenting. Yeah. Really short-sighted at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand, a lot of times when an entrepreneur is launching many products and they're bootstrapped, that they might not know if this particular product is going to really go anywhere, and so they don't want to invest in it.
That's why I'm a big fan of provisionals, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
gives us the time to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. For on the utility side, on the design side, I mean, you can't do a provisional, but it's still relatively inexpensive to file. And so it's usually worth it. Now, let's talk about Podetize, because this was, you spent a good deal of time and have had an amazing career designing products for yourself and other people with amazing successes. But then now it's almost like you've got the kind of the little crowning achievement here, as I see it, with Podetize. Like, so what was the need that you saw that led to you creating Podetize? And just let's talk a little bit about what you really have created here.
Well, we wouldn't be good designers and good innovators if we weren't paying attention to shifts in the marketplace. And so what we were seeing was a tremendous shift in the design consulting market. There were less and less designers being involved in the process. It was harder and harder for us to onboard clients, and we would have to start charging them more and more because they were few and far between. And so we were really seeing something that wasn't going to be long-term viable. So we started our first podcast, which was WTFFF 3D printing, which you mentioned earlier. And so we started this 3D print podcast as a test, saying, we see this market disruption happening. Is it going to be 3D printing? We actually weren't that confident that it was be. And I think we were right, because it's incredibly hard to design for a 3D printer. And so unless there's really great design libraries out there, nobody's sitting at home going, this isn't going to take me hours and hours to figure out how to use it. It does take a long time to use one. So we were providing information around there. And the way we sought to do it was just to podcast, because it was super simple. This was early on in podcasting, 2014 to 2015, when we were setting this up. And it was just a really easy way. Live streaming wasn't as big a deal, wasn't big. So that just wasn't the case that it was easy to do that. So the audio seemed accessible, inexpensive, and just really easy for us to test out whether or not there was a market for this. What we clearly found out was that it was a good thing we didn't shift our entire business and go into 3D printing. There really wasn't a market for the part of the market that we wanted to participate in, that we were really great at, wasn't going to pay enough money for that. It wasn't going to be a good offshoot to our business. But what we found was we excelled at designing the process of podcasting. So just like designing a product, we design podcasts, and in almost the same way, following our same systems, our same processes that we'd always used to design product. Do a little research, understand your market, bring them together, put a strategy in place, and then implement and execute out on delivering that as an end result product, which is how a podcast looks, sounds, how it's found in search engines. Think about just all the products today that we put on Amazon. If we don't optimize our listing, then we don't get found on Amazon. It's the same thing with podcast. It's just content that needs to be found somewhere. And so we just treat our podcasts like products. And it turned out that other people were begging us to do it. And that's literally how it happened, is they were saying, you're doing this and it's so amazing. Can you do this for me? Here's my credit card. And so we started this business 5 years ago. It had already been in, I'm going to call it the sort of side hustle phase for a year and a half, where we'd been doing it amid our product business. So we were still taking podcasting clients and product clients at the same time. And then we phased out of it because when we saw the path for where it was going to go, we saw we can do the same thing that we teach our client used to do with our clients, which is start stacking innovation, start building a portfolio of intellectual property, start bringing products and services to the market together. And in this case, products happen to be software or a physical microphone, which is coming out soon. So we had all these things that we could bring to the table. And lucky for us, we were at the right timing in the marketplace. So we were at that cusp of where it was headed up in the wave. So our thought leadership, our position within that, was just at the very beginning of that, but not too early, right? Where you're teaching everybody else how to do this, and then it fades before you've made enough money. And so for us, we were just at that right moment in time, but we built an amazing process system software that everyone can use. And we've been really focused on how to achieve that goal and get it to its high valuation.
Yeah. And so in terms of getting it to that high valuation, so like right now you're doing something really unusual with a company like this and using crowdfunding. So tell me about that.
So equity crowdfunding is not like Kickstarter. So I just want to be clear out there. So those of you that might be familiar, because you're product people, about Kickstarter, equity crowdfunding is actually, letting people buy into your company. They're buying to be a part of the community. They buy something in what is called a crowd safe vehicle, which is a shareholders agreement, but there's no shares exchanged yet. You have to have a triggering event that occurs to where there's actual stock exchange going on. So you're buying in basically almost like an option. Think of it that way. You're buying in an option. So you could get bought out, or you could end up owning stock in a unicorn. You never know, right? And so that's how that works in sort of the crowdfund model. But I'd spent 18 months prior meeting with investors that were private equity investors, institutional banks. I'd been meeting with venture capital firms, and I went and angel groups, all different kinds of ways I went around. And the problem is that none of them fit the model of business that I wanted to do, or their way of achieving their return on investment was not going to fit my model of business. So some of them, they wanted a really fast, immediate return. Others, they wanted to force you into a path that another podcasting company, let's say, took this path, and it's all on user acquisition. And that's the only thing. If we give you money, you're going to spend it on that and only get users into your platform. And I looked at that and just said, none of those fit the model of company I want to have at the end of it. And I want a $1 billion valued company. And that's where I'm headed to. And that's what I'm going for. And I believe all along the way, these are going to be the segments and steps. And when they wouldn't agree on them, they'd start to argue with me about them. Then I was like, this isn't a right fit for me. So what I realized is that part of what it was that they were resisting is this idea that I'm building a community that is supporting a community. So my business, Podetize, is supporting the community of podcasters who aren't able to achieve Joe Rogan level numbers in their podcast show. They're less than 2% of podcasts will ever make any money off of advertising on their show. They might advertise for their own things. They might have sponsorships like legal firms and other things like that, but they're not making those general ad sponsors that make, you millions of dollars a year like Joe Rogan, right? That's just not going to happen to 98% of the podcasts out there. So how can they do it? Well, YouTube is a great model for that, but most YouTubers don't make any money either, right? So how can we achieve a better level of that and allow people to be participating in that process as hosts? And so we have some plans for some blockchain and enabled algorithms and other things that are going to be like an employee stock ownership program for our hosts that are going to come that are on our platform and continuing to come onto our platform. And that in and of itself just lended itself to the crowdfund community because it's all a share economy at the end of the day. So we realized that if we could get the crowdfund community to say that's valuable, and they invest, then when we go out and roll out that into our model of business next year, the hosts are going to join too, because that's valuable to them too. So that's what we realized is it was just a stepping stone to almost test out our concept, test out our strategy, and it's working.
Yeah, it's like creating lots of stakeholders in the success of Podetize.
Yeah, I think the biggest complaint I get from crowdfund investors are you're going to end up buying me out, aren't you? Like, because that typically does happen where an investment bank might come in and they buy out all the stockholders. They're like, I want to own it all the way through to wherever it's going to go. So that's what we hear. And so I'm thinking to myself, we need to hear that's the question that they ask most is, are you going to sell me out? They'll make their return. So they're happy with that, but they want to be able to stay with it. And so how can we create an environment where we can keep them with it? And that's one of the things we do have plans for.
Awesome. That's amazing. And there's just so many stories of innovation to tap into here. But another one I really like is with regards to the microphone. So you're in the process of creating a podcasting microphone, not just an ordinary microphone like we each have in front of us, but a recording microphone. But there was a painful story that you had. It actually wasn't painful in the end, but there was a painful moment there which led to you creating the microphone. And I love that story. I'd love for you to tell it.
Well, I think, this is one of my favorite things about talking to innovators and inventors over the years. And I wrote a column for Inc. magazine for 4 years. And in that time, got to interview some amazing brands and hear their origin stories. And I love when you have that flash of genius, right? I love when there's that moment where it just occurs to you that this is all wrong. And that's exactly what happened here. So I was writing for Inc. magazine, had an opportunity to go to a blockchain and cryptocurrency conference and interview Steve Wozniak and many other people. And Woz was the reason I went, because he was just so amazing and cool. And luckily his interview happened in a back room and was perfectly great and nothing went wrong there. But I went to interview Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And I'm backstage behind the stage Common was also there. He was coming on behalf of Microsoft, and he was going to warm up and actually do a whole musical segment for us, which was really amazing. And so he's on stage warming up, and we're backstage with all this noise. And I've got my microphones and what we call is a mobile Zoom device. It's not Zoom like we take our videos and we're doing that on Zoom here, but it's a mobile device that you plug your microphones into. And there's no place, I have no pockets and I have no place to put it. So I drop that device down onto the ground lightly and I have my microphones. Gary Vee walks up, I shake his hand. We have 3 minutes because they got to get us out of that backstage. And I hand him a microphone and we go. And I talk fast, as you know, and you could hear here, but Gary talks fast, like really fast. And so we're going back and forth, 3 minutes. And everyone's just, their jaws are just dropping because I'm asking him hard-hitting questions and he's answering like such an interesting way. One of the best interviews I'd ever done. And I shake his hand. He was like, that was so great. Let's have another interview in the future. And I was like, okay, yes, now I'm going to get him for longer. And so I go to pick up my device off the ground and the batteries had died. And I didn't get 1 second of my interview with Gary Vee, not 1 second of it. So I do what all business partners and wives do. I called my husband and partner and screamed at him. And I said, Tom, this is so ridiculous. This device is so stupid. I feel like a bag lady with all this stuff. The batteries die before it's even like 4 hours in. You can't possibly be a professional like this. And, you know, I'm done. like I'm done. And so he hears me, he lets me rant. But the designer in him said, opportunity. Flash of genius goes off and he starts sketching in a sketchbook. And 2 weeks later, he comes to me and he said, hey, what do you think of this? And he shows me this self-recording microphone. Now it shifted over the 2 years we've been working on it because we've been working on it 2 years only because of the pandemic. But, you know, so it's just happened in that process there. But over the 2 years we've been working on it, I mean, essentially it's the same. It's got the same features, the same functions he designed into it. But, you know, how you accomplish something changes over time. But essentially you can go all day long recording with this microphone. Nothing's going to happen. The batteries aren't going to die. And if they do die, you can stick regular old batteries in them, not rechargeables, which I hate environmentally. But it was a choice because when you're at an event, you need to be able to go to the hotel store and buy batteries. You need to do what you need to do to get back and running and get back and recording. And lights that flash at you and give you 10-minute warnings. So you have plenty of time to wrap up your conversation before batteries die on you anyway. So like all of that is built into this microphone and we're so close to getting it done. The final samples came from China before Chinese New Year. And we are in the little bit of refining the software that's in it right now and the chips. And the chips were a nightmare with the chip shortages to get done, but we're really so close to launching it. And we are going to actually kickstart it just for fun. Not because we need to, because we can afford it. We can bring in the inventory, but Kickstarter is a great marketing tool. And so it would be remiss of us to not use the tools that are out there and seeing we already know how to handle crowdfunding and marketing campaigns for that because we've been doing it for the equity side. We can absolutely do that on the product side too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so now once the microphone is finished, are you going to send one to Gary Vee?
I already actually showed the very first prototype to his brother at an event. So we were doing a Super Bowl event in the beginning of 2020, and we had our very first basically working prototype, but I mean, it was kind of rough working. And so we were testing it out at that event and he got to play with it and he heard the story and he said, oh yeah, Gary will love this. So let's go into it. But we also have some other great podcasters and live streamers all lined up to help us promote it and to test it out for us and give demos.
Yeah, and maybe you can make a Gary Vee microphone NFT or something.
Exactly. We'll have to turn it into an NFT. But it does have if you're watching the video for this, you'll see that I have a mic block on my microphone that has the branding on it. So it does have a branding on it. So we can certainly put Gary Vee's brand on it for him.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, something else that you're doing is, recognizing that, first of all, like lots of people are interested in launching podcasts these days. And a lot of times they feel some barriers in the way of like, well, what is the focus going to be? Who is my audience going to be? How do I work out the technology? And so you've gone about to start to train people to help others to figure all of this out. You created a program for that. Like, I'd really love to hear more about it.
Yeah, so we have multiple programs. So we have a free boot camp. We made it free at the beginning of the pandemic because we wanted everyone to be able to access that. So we have this free boot camp. You go on our website and it's easy to find. And it's 6 to 8 hours of different content, depending on what you want to consume and the path you want to take to, do your show. You maybe don't want to edit it. And so, you can skip those editing videos, but there's all these videos that are there to help you, of course, to completely help you set up your show. Our system, our podcast syndication system, which helps you go out there and host, takes care of all the one-time things because, it's a shame for us to spend a lot of time learning how to submit our show to Apple when we do it once and then we don't have to do it again. Why should I have to watch a video to learn to do it? Let somebody else do that for me. So we've made our programs inclusive of those things. We don't charge extra for them. We just make them a part of everything we do to make it easy for someone to start a show. So that's the easy side. But sometimes we need business help, right? And Tom and I, this is what we know best. We know strategy. How do you make a great product so that it sells itself on the shelf? How do you make a great podcast show so that when I'm scrolling through the app, I want to click on it? What are those key features? What's a part of it? And how do I make that happen for you? Well, sometimes we need one-on-one assistance. We can't do it with making decisions. I can't prescribe something to you because it's not one size fits all. Your business, Rich, as a law firm is completely different than somebody who is a TikTok influencer. It's different business models and different results that they want from things. Some people have FINRA or, certification or FINRA regulations that are preventing them from being able to say things and do things. So we can't have that one size fits all. But I also can't grow a business and do that myself. I'm growing a multi-million-dollar business, billion-dollar valuation eventually. I can't do that and be the person that provides that. So how can I, in the share economy model, help others do that? So what we did was we saw podcast coaches and people offering setup and launch services and their own courses and programs popping up left and right. And we said, how can we support them so that their advice is better, informed by the fact that we've launched over 1,000 shows? I think when you said your stats at the beginning was like 550, that might be last year's numbers. We launched over 1,000 since that total. And so, that's okay because I should update my bio, right?
Yeah.
But we launched
your website, I think.
It's probably on my website, right? Because we haven't revamped it. Yeah. And so anyway, but yeah, with over 1,000, we know what works and what doesn't work. And someone who's just starting out, who's launched a dozen, doesn't have that data and information. So we launched a podcast certified strategist program. And it's a certification program in that anyone who would like to add podcasting services, be able to help people with the strategy and the launch piece. We're going to teach you about the business side of being a strategist, but also give you our intellectual property to utilize. That's why the certification is necessary for you to have a license to utilize those intellectual properties. So whether it's our checklists and our systems, or being able to access special pricing to use my team when you don't have a team yet, like all of those things are in that program and process. And so we just launched it. The beta is 2 weeks into it already, and we've had such great feedback on it. We really believe that this is going to be a great way to to help everyone grow, whether they're independent small business owners trying to start up their coaching business, or that they're the podcasters who are resulting from all of those things. Everyone's going to win in that process.
Wow. You do so many innovative and interesting things. I mean, you truly find all these opportunities to kind of reinvent yourself, reinvent some industry or field. You're truly a fascinating person, and I really appreciate you being here. And if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they go about doing so?
Well, you can find podetize.com easily on the website. And if you want to learn anything about podcasting, it's there. If you want to connect with me personally, go to LinkedIn, because that is the one social media platform where I participate in every single day.
Awesome. Again, thanks so much for being here. Looking forward to seeing you again at an event someday soon. And just thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me and for having such a great podcast.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.